This dollar says Federal Reserve note. The Federal Reserve prints every dollar in your wallet. But here's what nobody tells you. The Federal Reserve is not federal. It's not a reserve, and it's not part of the United States government. So who owns it? Who controls America's money supply? And who profits every time they print a new dollar? The answer is hiding in plain sight. And it's way stranger than you think. Most people think the Fed is like the Department of Treasury, a government agency. That's what I thought too. But then I found a document from the Fed's own website that changes everything. The Federal Reserve banks are not a part of the federal government, but they exist because of an act of Congress. Wait, what? They exist because of Congress, but they're not part of the government? That's like saying I was born because of my parents, but I'm not part of my family. Something doesn't add up. So I started digging, and what I found goes back to a secret meeting on a private island over 100 years ago. November 1910. 7 men board a private train car in New Jersey. They're told to use only first names. No last names allowed. They're told to pretend they're going duck hunting. But these aren't hunters. They're the most powerful bankers in America. Nelson Aldrich, Senate Majority Leader and Rockefeller's father-in-law. Frank Vanderlip, President of National City Bank. Henry Davison, Senior Partner at J.P. Morgan. Charles Norton, President of First National Bank. Benjamin Strong, another J.P. Morgan partner. Paul Warburg, partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Together, these 6 men represented about 1/4 of the world's wealth. They travelled to Jekyll Island, Georgia, a private resort owned by the richest families in America. For 9 days, they stayed locked inside. No staff allowed. They cooked their own meals. No records kept. And when they emerged, they had written the blueprint for the Federal Reserve System. But here's the twist. They didn't call it the Central Bank Act because Americans hated central banks. They'd already killed 2 of them. So they called it the Federal Reserve. A name designed to sound governmental and boring. 3 years later, on December 23rd, 1913, when most of Congress was home for Christmas, the Federal Reserve Act was rushed through and signed into law, and that's when everything changed. Okay, so who actually owns the Fed? This is where it gets weird. The Federal Reserve System has 12 regional banks across America. And these banks have shareholders, but you can't buy shares. You can't trade them on the stock market. The only shareholders allowed are private banks. If you're a bank in America, you're required to buy shares in your regional Federal Reserve Bank. You pay in, you get shares, and you get dividends. So yes, private banks literally own the Federal Reserve. Every year, the Fed makes profit from interest on government bonds, fees from banks, and other operations. In 2023, the Fed made over $100 billion. First, they pay their shareholders, the private banks, a guaranteed 6% dividend. Then they pay their own operating costs, and whatever's left goes to the US Treasury. But here's what blew my mind. The board of directors of each regional Fed bank. Half of them are chosen by the private banks themselves, so the banks own shares, elect directors, and receive guaranteed profits. But we're supposed to believe this isn't a private bank. Now here's where people get confused. But the Fed prints money, how is that private? Let me show you the actual process and prepare to have your mind blown. Step 1. The US government needs money. They issue treasury bonds, basically IOUs. Step 2. The Federal Reserve buys those bonds. But where does the Fed get the money? They create it, out of thin air, by typing numbers into a computer. Step 3. The government now owes the Fed money, plus interest. Step 4. The government pays that interest using your tax dollars. Step 5. The Fed takes that interest payment, keeps their cut, pays dividends to private banks, and sends the rest back to the Treasury. So let me get this straight. The government borrows money that the Fed creates from nothing, pays interest on it with our taxes, and private banks profit from the whole arrangement. When you really understand this, it's insane. Now, before the comments explode, is this a conspiracy? Not really, that the Fed is a weird hybrid that doesn't fit normal categories. It's not fully private. The president appoints the board of governors. It's not fully public. Private banks own shares and elect directors. Some argue this independence is good. It keeps politicians from printing money before elections. Others say it's a scam that benefits banks at public expense. Both Ron Paul and Elizabeth Warren have called for more transparency, or even abolishing the Fed. Strange bedfellows, right? But here's what's not debatable. private banks do own shares in the Federal Reserve. They do receive guaranteed dividends. They do help choose Fed directors. The Fed does create money and charge interest on it. And that interest is paid with tax dollars. Those are just facts. Whether that's good or bad, that's for you to decide. So next time you look at a dollar bill and see Federal Reserve note, remember, that note represents debt. Someone, somewhere, owes money plus interest on that dollar. And the entity that creates dollars out of thin air charges interest on them and pays dividends to private banks. Yeah, that's your central bank. Not federal, not a reserve, not exactly private, not exactly public, just powerful. The craziest part? Everything I just told you is publicly available information. It's on the Fed's own website, in congressional records, in their annual reports. They're not hiding it. We just don't look. So if this blew your mind, subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from. The history of money is full of stories like this, hidden in plain sight, controlling your life, and absolutely fascinating once you see them. Hit subscribe, you won't regret it.